A warrior people, forged by sacrifice and honor, who not only faced Rome, but became an inseparable part of it. The Sabines. Much is said about the legendary founders of the Eternal City, about Romulus and Remus, about the strength of the Latins and the cunning of the Etruscans. But few know the true story of the Sabines, those who, coming from the mountains, carried with them not only spears and shields, but a culture so powerful that it would intertwine with the destiny of Rome forever. They were not mere neighbors or simple rivals. They were descendants of ancient warriors, perhaps even of the Spartans, who centuries earlier had left Greece in search of new lands. Their blood ran hot, their faith was unshakable, and their spirit, unbreakable. Unlike the Romans, who grew as an ambitious city hungry for conquests, the Sabines had deep roots, ancestral traditions that shaped every aspect of their existence. But fate, always merciless, intertwined their paths in a brutal way. The rape of the Sabines, an event that would forever be marked in the history of Rome. The day when the Romans, in their desperate search for women to perpetuate their lineage, forcibly took the daughters of the Sabines. It was an act of betrayal and despair, igniting hatred and bringing war. And yet, it was also the beginning of something much greater. Spears were raised, shields clashed, armies met in the open fields. The Sabine women intervened between the fighters, pleading for an end to the bloodshed and destruction. And at that moment, the impossible happened. The Sabines did not destroy Rome. They became part of it. And so, in the silence after the battle, a new era began. With Sabine kings on the throne, with their gods being worshipped in marble temples, with their values shaping Roman identity. Without them, Rome would never have been Rome. But who were these men who challenged the Romans and then became one of them? How did such a powerful people dissolve into history, to the point of being forgotten by many? What really happened behind the scenes of the alliance between the Sabines and the Romans? If this story has awakened something in you, know that it was not by chance. The Sabines not only shaped Rome, they teach us that every great transformation is born from struggle, overcoming, and unity. And just as they changed the fate of an empire, you too can change your own story. Here, on this channel, we are building a community of restless minds, people seeking knowledge, who want to understand the past to become stronger in the present. If this mission resonates with you, then join us. Leave your like now and subscribe to the channel, because every interaction you make helps this message reach more lives. When you participate, you not only strengthen this community, you become part of this journey. Rome was not built alone, and together we can spread this knowledge to the world. The next chapter of this story begins now, and you are part of it. The Sabines were a people shrouded in mystery and legends. Their origins are lost in time, but ancient historians suggest that they descended from migratory groups coming from Greece, perhaps even from Sparta. This hypothesis is not absurd when one observes their military discipline, austere customs, and unwavering devotion to traditions. Unlike the Romans, who were an expansionist and pragmatic society, the Sabines valued honor above all, defending their land with an almost religious fervor. Located in the central region of Italy, the Sabines inhabited a mountainous and challenging land, situated north of the Tiber River. This environment, surrounded by hills and deep valleys, forged a resilient people accustomed to hardships. Their villages were fortified, strategically built on elevated points, which ensured protection against invaders. Unlike Rome, which was rapidly expanding, the Sabines preferred to remain isolated, safeguarding their traditions and identity. Their territory was close to the heart of the future capital of the empire, making the encounter between these two civilizations inevitable. Sabine culture was marked by rigid values and profound religiosity. Their rites and beliefs were distinct from those of other Italic peoples. Over time, many of their gods and practices were absorbed by Rome. The most notable among them was Quirinus, a Sabine deity who eventually became incorporated into Roman mythology and associated with Romulus himself, the founder of Rome. This religious syncretism demonstrates the influence of the Sabines. The Sabines were warriors by nature. From childhood, their sons were trained for combat, learning to wield spears and shields, much like the Spartans did in their age. The discipline was severe, and honor on the battlefield was the greatest symbol of prestige a man could achieve. Unlike the Romans, who viewed war as a means of territorial expansion, the Sabines fought for survival and tradition. They were known for their indomitable courage, unwavering loyalty to their own, and disdain for cowardice. The presence of the Sabines in the history of Rome was not a coincidence. They were not merely a neighboring people, but rather a distorted mirror of what Rome would come to be. While the Latins built a civilization focused on conquest, the Sabines remained faithful to an ancient code of conduct that valued discipline and resilience. This dichotomy between the two peoples did not drive them apart but unexpectedly brought them closer, forever shaping the destiny of the Eternal City. The winds of youth blew over Rome. The city, newly founded by Romulus, was a promise of greatness but faced an inevitable challenge: the lack of women. Without them, there would be no heirs, no continuity. Rome was a refuge for warriors, exiles, shepherds, and adventurers, but without family ties, its existence was fragile. Faced with this problem, Romulus saw no alternative but to resort to an audacious plan, an act that would go down in history as the turning point in the construction of the Roman people. The Sabines were Rome's most powerful and feared neighbors. Unlike the Latins, who were scattered peoples, the Sabines had a structured culture based on tradition, discipline, and military strength. Romulus knew that asking for their women in marriage would be futile. The Sabines despised the Romans, considering them barbarians without honor. Faced with the inevitable refusal, the Roman leader decided to act not with diplomacy, but with cunning. He devised a plan that would forever change the fate of his city and that of the Sabines themselves. The festival of Neptune Equesta was a sacred event for the Sabines. It was a time of celebration, games, and abundance. Men, women, and children traveled from their villages to Rome, unsuspecting, believing in the hospitality of their hosts. The Romans, for their part, were prepared. Every detail of the event was carefully planned to conceal their true intention. And so, when the right moment arrived, Romulus gave the signal. The fate was sealed. The attack was sudden. In the midst of the festivities, the Romans charged against the Sabine families. The women, the targets of the ambush, were torn from the arms of their fathers and brothers. Chaos spread rapidly. The screams pierced the air, the dust of the streets rose. The men desperately tried to protect their daughters. But the Romans were ready. With precise strategy, they dominated the situation and fled with the Sabine women behind the city walls. The shock for the Sabines was devastating. Their families had been violated, their honor shattered before Romulus's betrayal. There was no alternative but war. For months, the Sabine tribes prepared to attack Rome and rescue their women. The Sabine king, Titus Tatius, gathered a formidable army, determined to destroy the young city and restore the dignity of his people. The confrontation was inevitable. Rome would have to fight for its survival against a much stronger and organized enemy. The battle finally arrived. The Sabines, led by Tatius, marched against Rome, crossing the Tiber with their disciplined troops. From the heights of the walls, the Romans watched the fury of a people coming to reclaim their daughters. The gates opened, and the field of Mars became the stage for a fierce confrontation. Spear against spear, sword against sword. Blood against blood. The war that could annihilate Rome had begun. In the heart of the battlefield, fate would take an unexpected turn. The Sabine women, who had been kidnapped, were no longer the same. Months had passed, and between them and their captors something had been born: alliances, bonds, children growing in their wombs. They were no longer just Sabines, they were wives, they were mothers, they were the link between two peoples who hated each other but now shared a common future. With courage and desperation, the women broke through the lines of battle. They threw themselves between the armies, shouting for their families, pleading for an end to the bloodshed. Some embraced their Roman husbands, others ran into the arms of their Sabine fathers and brothers. The horror of war transformed into a moment of absolute silence. The warriors, taken aback by the shock, hesitated. The women did not merely plead for peace, they demanded a new path. They said there were no longer winners or losers. That Rome and the Sabines were forever linked, not only by the bloodshed but by the bonds built. If they continued to fight, they would kill their own descendants, their wives, their grandchildren who would one day carry the names of both peoples. Titus Tatius, faced with the courage and truth of his daughters, saw that continuing the war would mean the destruction of what remained of his people. Romulus, in turn, realized that the greatest triumph was not to defeat the Sabines, but to have them by his side. In an unprecedented act, the two leaders reached an agreement. The Sabines would not only accept the merger with Rome but would govern together. For the first time, Rome would have two kings. What began as an act of betrayal became the hallmark of true Roman identity. The Sabines were not merely absorbed, they transformed Rome from within. Their traditions, their gods, their warrior spirit were incorporated into the city's DNA. The discipline and pride of the Sabines now flowed through the heart of the future capital of the world. The fusion of the two peoples gave rise to something greater than either could have imagined. From that moment on, Rome was no longer just a refuge for exiles and landless warriors. It was becoming a civilization, an empire in the making. The Sabine and Roman blood mixed, creating a new lineage of fierce, resilient citizens ready to shape the destiny of humanity. But this alliance was not made without tensions. The Sabines demanded respect, and many among the Romans saw this union as a threat. Romulus and Titus Tatius would govern together, but how long could this peace last? Was this merger truly a victory, or merely the beginning of a new conflict? The story of Rome was still being written, and the influence of the Sabines was far from over. Now it's your turn. What do you think of the powerful influence of the Sabines in the construction of Rome? Do you believe their union with the Romans was the secret to Rome's success, or were there other crucial factors? Leave your opinion in the comments and let's start an amazing conversation about how this historical moment transformed the fate of a civilization. And if you know more curiosities about the Sabines or have a different perspective, share that too. Your insight can further enrich this debate. Let's exchange ideas and expand our knowledge about the Roman Empire. After the fusion between the Romans and the Sabines, a new era of transformation began to unfold in the streets and squares of Rome. The winds of change blew not only through the houses and temples but also in the government, military structure, and traditions that would come to define Roman identity. The presence of the Sabines in the formation of Rome was much deeper than the simple union of two peoples. They brought with them a worldview, a culture, and a way of governing that forged the foundations upon which Rome would rise as a world power. Shortly after the fusion, it became clear that the Roman model needed adjustments, as the city was still a young community with a fragile structure and little cohesion. The rise of Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome and of Sabine origin, was a turning point. Numa, known for his wisdom and religiosity, was a man deeply influenced by Sabine values, and his peaceful and strategic approach brought unprecedented stability to the city. He consolidated the religious foundations of Rome, founding cults and institutions that would still be remembered as pillars of Roman civilization. Numa Pompilius's implementation was not only spiritual but also political. He was a master in the art of uniting the different Roman and Sabine factions, ensuring that the two cultures blended harmoniously in governance. Numa established a system that balanced Sabine traditions with the pragmatic needs of a growing city. Under his reign, Rome began to be governed by just laws, reflecting not only Roman pragmatism but also the deep sense of duty and honor of the Sabines. When looking at the early kings of Rome, it is impossible not to notice the strong Sabine presence in political leadership. The Sabine influence was fundamental in the transition of Rome from a small, loosely structured city to an emerging power. But the Sabines did not only govern wisely, they brought with them a military legacy that would become the backbone of the Roman Empire. The Sabines were known for their rigorous discipline and the effectiveness of their combat tactics. This legacy profoundly influenced the military structure of Rome. The Romans, still an inexperienced people on the battlefield, observed and learned from the relentless effectiveness of the Sabines. The culture of disciplined training and the strict formation of Sabine armies were assimilated by the Romans, who quickly adapted these practices into their own ranks. Rome began to stand out as a highly efficient military machine, capable of defeating even the most powerful enemies. This strength was not only physical but also psychological, with Roman soldiers being prepared to withstand any adversity. The Roman military formation, with its well-trained and equipped legions, would become one of the greatest forces of the empire. This organization and discipline were strongly inspired by Sabine tactics, which prioritized cohesion and collective strength. More than that, the Sabines brought to Rome the idea that war was not just a means of conquest, but an expression of civic and moral duty. The Roman soldier did not fight merely for Rome, he fought for his family, for his homeland, for his values. But the Sabine influence in Rome was not limited to the battlefield. Sabine culture brought with it a strong sense of community duty, which would be essential for the growth of Roman society. Sabine morality, which valued justice, respect for law and order, shaped Roman laws, creating a solid foundation for what would become one of the greatest empires in history. Loyalty to the city and the community became one of the pillars of Roman culture. The Sabine ethics, with its emphasis on family, discipline, and respect for elders, also reflected in the Roman legal system. The early laws of Rome, which were based on Sabine tradition, were strict but also fair. These laws ensured order and stability while protecting the rights of citizens. The emphasis on duty and respect for others was fundamental in building a cohesive and resilient society, where each individual understood their responsibility towards others. Religion was another aspect of Sabine culture that deeply infiltrated Roman life. The Sabines brought their own gods and rituals, which were gradually incorporated into the Roman pantheon. Quirinus, one of the main Sabine gods, was particularly significant. He was associated with Romulus himself, and his worship became a symbol of the union between the Romans and the Sabines. This religious syncretism reflected the fusion of two cultures into one, and the Romans began to venerate not only their own gods, but also those of their Sabine neighbors. The Sabine religious rituals influenced how the Romans viewed life, death, and morality. Roman religious practice became more disciplined and ritualistic, reflecting the Sabine values of respect for the divine and cosmic order. The Sabine influence can also be seen in how the Romans structured their temples and priesthoods. While Roman religion was originally more focused on domestic practices, the inclusion of Sabine gods expanded this focus to a more formal and collective worship. In terms of politics, the very structure of the Roman government was profoundly marked by the Sabine presence. The tradition of the two kings, the Roman and the Sabine, continued to be a significant part of governance until Rome finally established itself under a republican system. Even after the fall of the monarchy, the Sabine influence remained. The Sabine values of discipline, morality, and community duty were reflected in republican values, which ultimately influenced the expansion of Rome. The Sabine moral code was also fundamental in shaping what would become the Roman ideal. Loyalty to the state, respect for authority, and commitment to justice were principles that transcended the era of kings and shaped Roman behavior for centuries. Throughout Roman history, the Sabines continued to be a reference point for the Romans. Their contribution to the formation of the city cannot be underestimated. The incorporation of Sabine culture into Rome was a process of fusion, not subjugation. Both peoples brought their own riches, their own virtues, and together built a new model of civilization. Through this union, Rome became stronger, more resilient, and more unified. And so, with the strength and wisdom of the Sabines shaping the destiny of Rome, the city prepared to write a new chapter in its history, which would soon spread throughout the known world. Before we move on to the next topic, I noticed you haven't liked this video yet. This is super important as it helps YouTube promote our content to more people, allowing us to continue bringing you more information to help you. So, don't waste time, leave your like here, it's free and makes all the difference. Thanks. The history of Rome is marked by military and political conquests and the fusion of peoples and cultures, shaping the essence of the empire. Among these peoples, the Sabines stood out, transforming from a rival force to an essential pillar of ancient Rome. From a mountainous land with fortified villages, the Sabines became an inseparable part of Roman civilization. Their traditions and values infiltrated Roman society, influencing the mindset of Romans and their descendants. Initially, Rome was a small city facing challenges. When Romulus sought the help of the Sabines, a powerful symbiosis between the cultures emerged, with the Sabines bringing discipline and community duty to Rome. The Sabines were not mere conquerors or allies, they were partners in strengthening Rome, shaping the empire's course for centuries. Many great Roman families were direct descendants of the Sabines. The Sabine influence was crucial in forming the Roman elite. Through marriages and the rise of Sabine leaders, their values permeated Roman high society, with families acquiring status due to their lineage and principles. Discipline, a notable Sabine virtue, became a pillar of Roman society. The emphasis on rigorous training and preparation for battle in the Roman army was a direct inheritance from Sabine culture. The concept of duty to the community, respecting elders, and fulfilling obligations was passed down through generations, forming the foundation of Rome's military power, morality, and political greatness. The cult of discipline was present in all aspects of Roman life. Roman children's education was influenced by Sabine practices of respect for hierarchy and hard work, incorporating a sense of duty into the legal system. Roman laws reflected Sabine ethics of justice, equity, and collective responsibility. Loyalty, another Sabine legacy, was a civic imperative, guiding the actions of citizens and rulers, maintaining Rome's unity. In battles and military campaigns, Sabine bravery merged with Roman strength and strategy. Bravery was not merely a matter of courage on the battlefield, but also a virtue representing the ability to endure hardships and challenges without losing focus on the mission. Roman soldiers, influenced by this Sabine spirit, became feared throughout Europe and later across the known world. Thus, Sabine bravery was not just a physical aspect, but a cultural attribute that came to define the character of the empire. The Sabines, with their austere lifestyle focused on hard work and sacrifice, left an indelible mark on the Roman economy. Rome, influenced by Sabine ethics, developed an economy that valued production, manual labor, and agriculture. Unlike other civilizations that relied more on trade and luxury, the Romans adopted a more pragmatic and realistic approach, inspired by the spirit of Sabine self-sufficiency. This focus on production and hard work contributed to the exponential growth of the empire. Moreover, the Roman pantheon was enriched by the incorporation of Sabine gods. The worship of Quirinus, for example, became a symbol of the fusion between the two peoples. Quirinus was not just a god of the Sabines, he came to be seen as a representation of the strength and unity of Rome. By worshipping the Sabine gods, the Romans acknowledged and celebrated the contribution of the Sabines to the building of their city and empire. This religious worship, besides uniting the two peoples, helped establish the spiritual foundation that would sustain Rome for centuries. Sabine culture also profoundly influenced Roman art and architecture. The construction of temples and other public buildings, often inspired by Sabine styles, reflected the simplicity and grandeur that characterized both the Sabines and the Romans. Over time, these buildings became symbols of Rome, and their influence can be seen in structures that still exist throughout the Western world. Roman art, in turn, was also shaped by this Sabine heritage, with an emphasis on representing strength, virtue, and discipline. The marriage between Romans and Sabines, which initially seemed a necessity to resolve the lack of women in the city, became a symbol of the Romans' ability to incorporate and adapt the best qualities of other peoples. The union of Rome and the Sabines was not merely a fusion of blood, but an alliance that would last for centuries and be crucial for the rise of the Roman Empire. Over time, the history of Rome became inextricably intertwined with that of the Sabines. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued to carry the legacy of their Sabine ancestors. Roman leaders who descended from the Sabines kept alive the flame of Sabine traditions of discipline, loyalty, and bravery. As Rome advanced on its journey to become one of the most powerful and enduring civilizations in history, this Sabine legacy was not limited to a mere cultural influence, it was the key to building a strong, cohesive, and unbeatable Rome. The Roman mindset, forged by Sabine values, became the foundation upon which the Roman Empire rose and thrived, leaving an eternal mark on the history of humanity. Throughout this video, we delve into the fascinating history of the Sabines and their immense contribution to the formation of Rome. We saw how a people initially rival. Through epic events like the famous abduction of the Sabines, became an essential pillar for the empire that would dominate the world. From this forced union, the Sabines brought to Rome not only women but also values of discipline, loyalty, and bravery that endured for centuries, shaping the Roman mindset and being fundamental to the construction of Rome's military and political power. With their influences, the Sabines helped form a society that valued order, community duty, and morality, creating a solid foundation for the empire. Their contribution was not only in military and political terms, but also in the religious and cultural sphere, through the incorporation of their gods and practices into the Roman pantheon. From all this, we can see that, no matter how much cultures clash initially, it is possible to create something new and even more powerful from these fusions. The legacy of the Sabines, with their values and discipline, has endured through the ages and became the force that sustained the Roman Empire for centuries, leaving an indelible mark on the history of the Western world. Now that you know the profound influence of the Sabines in the construction of Rome, imagine how much you can learn from the wealth of stories like this, which shaped the greatest empires in history. If you are someone who seeks to understand the power of history and how it can transform our worldview, then you are in the right place. Here, on our channel, we continue to explore these epic journeys that marked humanity, and it is with your support that we can bring even more inspiring content to you. If this video sparked your interest and you want more, subscribe to the channel now and don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss any new content that will further expand your knowledge. And, of course, leave your like if you believe that the story of the Sabines and their fusion with Rome can inspire others. Each like is a way to show that you value this type of content and helps this message reach more people who, like you, wish to dive into the power of stories that transform the world. Join us in this mission to bring more knowledge and inspiration to everyone around us. Your engagement is the fuel that allows us to continue bringing videos that will challenge, inspire, and transform lives. Together, let's build a community of learning and evolution. And if you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this content with those who also love to learn more about the great stories that shaped our civilization. Let's continue exploring the legacy of peoples who, with courage and wisdom, altered the course of history forever.